Firemen tried to break through double security doors to reach 13 trapped employees. The attack leaves 4 dead and 9 critically injured. 5 later die in hospital. With no emergency exits or sprinklers at the branch, the tragedy prompts calls for reviews in fire prevention.
We will sort of have further discussion with the bank to see whether they could strike a balance between fire safety and security.
One can never make sure that this kind of thing doesn't happen again, but if it does happen, one can make sure that people throughout the banking community, and I would hope going beyond the banking community, are as prepared as they possibly can be to make sure that the damage from from fires such as this in particular is minimized.
The place where tragedy struck becomes a place of hope, with the Red Cross setting up a blood bank there.
By converting it to a life-saving service, we actually give a very good ending to a tragic story.
And hope fuels more than 100 rescuers from the territory and Malaysia as they begin combing the rugged terrain of Mount Kinabalu for 5 missing soldiers lost during a training exercise. 3 are from Hong Kong and 2 are British. After being missing for nearly a month, the soldiers are found.
I'm feeling fine, thank you. Just looking forward to seeing all the family and everybody back home.
The troops head home, but the leaders of the expedition are blamed for the near disaster by exercising poor judgment.
The type of training my expedition was involved in was obviously a serious undertaking. But so is training for war.
An Aeroflot plane flying from Moscow to the territory crashes with 6 Hong Kong Chinese on board. Relatives of the victims seek compensation and answers. It's later revealed the captain's son was in the pilot's seat when the plane took its fatal nosedive, killing all 75 passengers on board. At Kai Tak, a Hercules plane plunges into the harbour after takeoff. 6 Indonesian crew members are killed in the crash that happened after their return from a repatriation flight to Vietnam. Aviation officials later cite pilot and mechanical errors as the likely causes for the disaster. Hong Kong sees record rainfall that causes serious flooding and deadly landslips. Rescuers fight time and the dark in reaching residents buried in a landslip at the Kwun Lung Lau housing estate in Weston. The landslip leaves not only 5 dead, but also questions as to why improvements were not made to reported leakages in the estate's slopes. A Canadian slope expert arrives to investigate. He later concludes the disaster could have been prevented. In Aberdeen, disaster strikes when a balcony collapses in a busy shopping district. 12 tons of masonry shower the streets, killing an elderly woman. The accident leads to mandatory inspections of some 60,000 private buildings. But those targeted for demolition come under scrutiny when a wall collapse on Nathan Road kills 5 pedestrians. Lack of supervision is given as the reason for the tragedy. The disaster leads to tougher requirements on demolition sites. Meanwhile, bus safety draws attention after a city bus double-decker falls to its side in Aberdeen. 41 people are injured. The next day, another crash, this time fatal. The collision's impact causes the driver to be thrown out of his seat and run over by his own vehicle. 13 passengers are injured. The accidents prompt criticism. Drivers are meeting demanding schedules at the expense of safety. And safety measures seem to be on many Hong Kong people's minds as China's controversial Daya Bay nuclear power plant opens for business in February, after 7 years of construction and controversy. 10 months later, a refueling shutdown occurs, but plant officials play down fears of dangerous levels of contamination.
For the 27,000-strong police force, a new boss is appointed.
I am fortunate to follow in the wake of Commissioner Lee Guan-ha, who has steered the force through a major management and technological revolution that places our force at the forefront of modern law enforcement agencies.
It may be up to date, but critics maintain the force is way behind in looking into complaints against one of its own. Lawmakers push for an independent body to investigate grievances, but the idea is rejected.
There are improvements to be made, but we think that we should build on the present system rather than trying to overturn it.
But the force breaks away from tradition with plans to have armed policewomen on the streets by next year. For extra muscle out on the field, a bill is passed giving officers sweeping authority in combating crime. Lawmakers, though, worry the organized and serious crime bill may mean a blank check for officers.
These powers, if abused, could seriously threaten our basic civil liberties. And to be realistic, the risk of abuse is not small.
But others believe it's give and take.
If I were asked to choose between protecting the many innocent victims of criminal violence or the few who fall victim to police abuse, I would have to choose and give priority to the innocent victims of crime.
A deadly shootout in Central. The holdup at the landmark shopping area turns violent, and the suspects open fire at police.
Suddenly people started running, they were shouting, and within seconds I heard shots. I don't know, maybe 2, maybe 3. And people started running into the shop. I dived over the counter. I just wanted to get out the way.
The shooting leaves one civilian dead and several others, including an officer, wounded. Another violent drama unfolds. This time, officers engage in a gun battle in Aberdeen. It's a hostage situation. The suspect abducts a Korean businessman and a woman in a hijacked taxi. Shortly after, a shootout erupts. The suspect and the hostage, 31-year-old Kang Sang-bo, are killed. The taxi driver gives this account of what happened.
開咗槍之後咧，就好多血啦。佢點解唔俾我拆走咗先至等我哋安全咗，然後先至去追個賊嘅？
An independent forensic report suggests Kang had been killed by a police bullet, raising questions whether officers may have mishandled the situation. An inquest into Kang's death is expected early next year. No doubt for Kang's widow, the delay can only deepen the mystery surrounding the circumstances of the gun battle, and why it ended so tragically. Tension mounts in the territory's detention camps as a United Nations mandate aims to have all boat people repatriated in 2 years. Many VBPs say they'd rather face death than return home. Thousands go on a hunger strike, while some attempt suicide. For many, Hong Kong is the only home they know, with the VBP situation spanning more than a decade. And authorities discover transferring the boat people can be more trying than repatriating them. At Whitehead, authorities use military-style tactics to remove 1,500 VBPs for transfer. But the number of casualties from the operation raises concern.
I don't think it was as tense as perhaps the government says it was.
The governor urges for an investigation.
so we can decide whether any further action needs to be taken, and so we can consider how we handle cases like this in the best way in the future.
The findings of the report on the Whitehead raid cites that removal had been handled ineptly and the use of tear gas had been premature.
Given that many people were asleep at the time, it was important to have taken more time and more effort to get the message of what was happening across to everybody.
One recommendation from the report calls for an observer to be on hand for future exercises.
The changes that it recommends are very few and very minimal, and to the Vietnamese people are basically meaningless. The bottom line for them is that this can happen again.
3 correctional services officers go to court as they face assault charges concerning the Whitehead operation. The government, in the meantime, decides to release 125 VBPs. Later, another 16 are freed. The moves are to head off a lawsuit it's unlikely to win.
We had no option in the matter. Had we decided to continue to detain these Vietnamese migrants, we would have been exposed to legal action, and the legal advice was that we would not win.
But it seems forcing Vietnamese boat people back home isn't the issue. It's whether or not Hanoi will take them. It refuses to accept one group of VBPs who arrived in the territory via China.
This is the first time it's ever happened. It's completely unprecedented. We must discuss this with the Vietnamese authorities. I think it's a little bit unfair to say the Hong Kong government made a mistake.
Vietnam agrees to talk to the Hong Kong government concerning the issue, but a date has yet to be fixed, along with the governor's plan to make a historic visit to Hanoi next year.